Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tuesdays with Tally. This is episode 55, and I'm your host, Brian Tally. The mission and the goal of this podcast is to bring an engaging conversation that will add value to the lives of everyday people. We will inspire, encourage, educate, and tell the stories of America's finest men and women in an effort to motivate you to live your life to its fullest potential. Be sure to follow us on social media and on Spotify. The online information and handles are all located on the scrolling ticker at the bottom portion of your screen. Be sure to like and share the program as well. You can also support the program by going to Anchor FM or Spotify and clicking the support button. Do you own a business? Do you want exposure? Do you want to be heard? Advertise your business right here on this podcast. Program sponsorships include a custom written script to advertise your business to its fullest potential to get the results you're looking for. Email me directly at thetallybill@gmail.com and let's set up an impactful advertising plan to help you and your business get the results you're looking for. Again, email me directly at thetallybill@gmail.com. That's thetallybill@gmail.com. Folks, we have a very special guest joining us on today's program. Aaron Haynes was raised in Colorado and graduated from Woodland Park High School in 1995. He attended college at Western State College in Gunnison, Colorado, where he earned a bachelor's degree in business and was a captain on the football team. While at Western State College, he attended Marine Corps Officer Candidate School in the Platoon Leaders Class program during the summers in Quantico, Virginia. After graduating from Western State College, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps and attended the basic school in Quantico, Virginia. Upon completion of the basic school in January of 2001, he underwent Naval Aviation training in Pensacola, Florida, where he flew the T-34 and TH-57. He was designated a Naval Aviator in 2002 and reported to Camp Pendleton for instruction as an Alpha Hotel 1 Whiskey and Zulu Cobra pilot. His personal decorations include Air Medal Strike Flight Award with the numeral 10, Meritorious Service Medal, a Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with 2 gold stars, and the Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal with 2 gold stars. Aaron, or should I say the Major, has over 500 hours of combat flight time and over 3,000 hours of military flight time. He is the epitome of a Marine and a true American hero. With that, we are honored to be joined by Major Aaron Haynes, United States Marine Corps, retired. How are you, sir?
Pretty good. How are you, Brian?
Hey, I'm hanging in there, man. Another day, another dollar, another podcast, doing something that's pretty awesome right now, and I got to put it on here. Today, we are day number 62 of this brand new podcast, and you are episode 55. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Hey, man, the pleasure is all mine. The pleasure is all mine. Folks, for everybody that is tuning into this program tonight, you may recognize this bearded man over here. It's going to be a very familiar face to a lot of you folks, especially the folks that walk the halls of Woodland Park High School, as I once did as well when Aaron was amongst us as a jock, an athlete, an incredible football player in Woodland Park. But hey, anyways, man, growing up in Colorado, growing up in Woodland Park, growing up at 8,500 feet above sea level, describe your childhood and what it was like growing up in Woodland Park.
Growing up in Woodland Park, it was an amazing town. You got the north face of Pikes Peak right there, which you see every day when you go to school. And it's just some of the most beautiful country in the world. Lots of outdoors activities as far as hunting and fishing, snowboarding, you name it, you can do it there in Woodland Park. And it was very enjoyable. You mentioned, sports, the athletic program had its issues before we got there. And we kind of turned things around, which was nice. But we were known, in the athletic program, especially with football, as a team that didn't do so well, that had trouble winning games, and then we ended up winning some games our junior year and then our senior year as well, which was pretty special for me and you, and I'm sure everybody in the town and on the team. So it was pretty cool to go from 0-49 to having some wins there our junior year, and then even more our senior year.
That was Buena Vista, if I remember. That was our win, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Oh yeah, man, I'll never forget that. Wasn't that like 12-6?
No, I think it was a little bit more than that. But it was good to get that W.
Man, I tell you what, man, we battled adversity at a
We
young
sure
age
did.
in high school,
Yeah.
and that wasn't easy. I mean, we got made fun of. We had people throw rocks at our bus, especially when we played in like Sheridan and in Inglewood and all that stuff in Denver. And yeah, we were known as the losers, man. It's like, come on, guys, we're good kids.
No, it was rough. And I mean,
Yeah.
that took its toll on the program. There were people that didn't want to play because the program just wasn't that good. There were a lot of players that, they would just play other sports and they wouldn't play football because it was like, wait, and if people didn't hear me earlier, we were 0-49. It was a state record. And so it affected the program. The kids didn't want to play. And so we had to play both ways, offense and defense. It was extremely difficult. And we persevered, and luckily we had some good coaches. We had Coach Bertrand came in, and he brought his family, large family with lots of kids that played for him as well, and he had an impact. You can't go from 0-49 to having a winning season overnight. It's going to take some time to build up that program, and I think Coach Bertrand had a significant impact, although didn't get all the glory for all the wins, but the bigger, faster, stronger training program. He got us lifting out there. We had these logs we were lifting up and down the stands and around the track. And he brought in a different dynamic that, we hadn't really seen before. And then, Coach Hawley, after that, Coach Greg Hawley, one of my favorite coaches, he just increased the success that Coach Bertrand, brought to us. And they ended up doing pretty well after we left. So it was good to see that program get on track.
Yeah, absolutely. The cool thing about it is I had a high school friend up there last week, I believe, taking pictures of this next generation coming through, playing football, their homecoming game, and the field looks the same. It really brought me back. It was nostalgic. Yes, they have a nice rubber track now, but the field, I mean, it still has that crown on it and everything. I'm like, man, to go back, oh man, I'd do anything.
Yeah, same here. It seemed like a lot of people would do anything to leave when we were there. And, as I've grown older, I'd do almost anything to get back there. It's a beautiful place.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everybody wanted to get out, Woodland Park, everybody wanted to get out. And then once we got out, we're like, man, that was really a beautiful town. As a matter of fact, my brother just moved back to Woodland Park. After
nice.
spending over 20 years in Fort Collins, he said, "Yeah, too much. I'm going back to Woodland Park." So
good for him.
Well.
I watched that podcast and I really enjoyed that. It was good to see you guys interact. And I wouldn't be able to pick him out of the lineup. He has aged well, but I would not have been able to pick him out of the lineup.
He is a fine wine, I tell you that, man. Look, he started losing his hair, I think, at 19, so he's got like a huge receding hairline. He's gray. I mean, but hey, man, that kid, man, he is a warrior. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, that was a great podcast.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
So, Woodland Park, you played sports, you played football, you were a leader, you were a captain. Even though we didn't do well in high school, you were a very, very good ball player. So you would end up going and playing college football right down the road in Gunnison at Western State College. Describe how that all unfolded.
Yeah, so my senior year, I was definitely interested in continuing playing sports, and football was the one that I chose. My brother, he was a baseball player, and he was 5 years older than me, so he went the baseball route, and I went the football route, and I saw him excel in college, and that was something that I strived to do. He was a big influence in my life, and I wanted to be just like my brother. I wanted to, go do what he did. And I just wanted to do it in football. He didn't have the opportunity to play football, but I did. And I wanted to continue that. And I did some recruiting trips around like, Nebraska area, Kansas, and, through Colorado as well. And Western State kind of stuck out. It was like, wow, this place is pretty special. I like this town. It's close to home, but just far enough away. It was just about a 2-hour drive away. And I really like the coaches. I like the program. Extremely successful program as far as conference champions the majority of years in the 90s. Almost every year, conference champions, which was very impressive. So I didn't get a scholarship, but they invited me to football camp. And, I redshirted and I ended up working my way up. But I really enjoyed, being in Gunnison, the college. Coaches were amazing and the players and that environment. It was a great place to be.
Now, for the listeners out there that may not know anything about Western State College, you're about to find out, because we all know who Austin Eckler is. Austin Eckler is alumni of Western State College, the same football team that Aaron was a captain on during his time there in the 90s. So Austin Eckler went there. So that's where it's at. And it's also in an ice box. Gunnison, Colorado is in an ice box. So when people are like, oh, the Chargers are coming to the cold weather to play Buffalo. Yeah. And they say, oh, yeah, they can't play in the cold weather. Let's not forget about Austin Eckler. I mean, that guy grew up in an ice box. He played in an ice box. And we all know the western slope of Colorado and Gunnison itself is nicknamed the ice box. So what was it like playing out there in the cold, the snowballs, the wind blowing and everything? Describe that.
Well, it was definitely a unique environment to play in. And another fun fact, it is the highest NCAA football field out there. It's 7,723 feet. It's the Mountaineer Bowl, and it's the highest NCAA football field. So elevation, we would have the advantage, much like in high school. The teams would come up to play us, and they would have difficulty breathing where we were, in very good shape and we were used to the altitude. So the other teams would have some issues with that. But yeah, it was definitely a unique environment. During 2-a-days, we would go sit in the river, and it was straight runoff from the mountain. So it was freezing. You could only be in there for about 10 minutes without getting hypothermia. But it was good. It helped your body feel a little bit better after 2-a-days. And yeah, it was quite an interesting environment to go to college in and play football in. Extremely cold during the winters. And luckily the season's during the fall generally, and then kind of goes into the winter a little bit. But yeah, it was definitely a great place, college. And much like Woodland Park, it had all the things I mentioned before. I mean, the hunting, the fishing. I got my first deer when I was in Woodland Park. I got that in high school. I got my first elk. It was a 4x4 bull elk when I was in college. We went ice fishing, fly fishing, hiking, snowboarding, cross-country skiing. It was the outdoorsman's paradise, and that's likely why we are the Mountaineers of Western State College. Yeah, it's a very mountaineer type environment.
Love it. Hey, by chance, is that school famous for partying?
Well, we work hard, play hard, and you're absolutely right. When we were in high school, we used to hear of Western State and called Wasted State. And it is definitely a good party town. And we had some good times. So we worked hard, played hard, and that's how we rolled.
Man, I miss you, man. I remember going up to 315. You remember 315?
Oh, I can't stop thinking about 315. Wow, when we were in high school, we'd go up to Rampart Range, and I was thinking we need to go up and do that again sometime.
Have a couple pops, man. And, man.
Yeah.
And you played at elevation 7,700 feet in college. And you're like, man, this ain't nothing, man. I'm playing at 8,500 feet. And then we're going up to Rampart, which is at 9,000, 9,300 feet,
right.
To hunt or whatever. It's like, man, this ain't nothing. So, man, I love that. I love the fact that, you went from a losing program, a program that we helped turn around, and you went into a more developed, more structured, more winning program. Now, when you showed up there to Western State College, did you have a plan in hand to essentially join the United States Marine Corps, or was the Marine Corps something that maybe came a little bit later after you checked into to Western State?
It came in a little bit later. Yeah. I wasn't quite sure. I knew I wanted to play sports as long as I could, and I knew Western was going to be a part of that. And yeah, it was definitely interesting, as you'd mentioned. Going from a program that wasn't so good at Woodland Park to going to Western State with a very successful program. You had to work your way up, and I redshirted my first year. Didn't play a single down in a single game. I was out there, helping out the other, on the practice squad, learning all of our system, learning our defense, helping out the offense wherever I could. Started out safety, and then they moved me to outside linebacker. So, I made my way up my freshman year and sophomore year through special teams. Started one game as a sophomore when one of the best athletes I've ever seen, he was the guy who was in front of me, Dante, but he got injured. So I got to start one game my sophomore year, and then ended up starting every game my junior year, and starting, every game my senior year, and being a captain my senior year. So it was, going from the bottom to, a successful program, and, moving up in there and having to earn your way up by hard work. And I think, some of that hard work was instilled to us while we were at Woodland Park.
You're a unique man. I knew you well in high school, and I never hinted, or you never hinted at all, that you would ever be a Marine. Let's face it, I wore my Marine Corps recruiting shirt, I think every other day, because I was proud of, hey, I'm going to be a Marine. And a few other, of us too, like Jeremy Rosson and, Teddy Gonzalez, Marines, right? But
absolutely,
I would have never pictured Aaron Haynes being a Marine. But if I ever would picture you being a Marine, it would be a Marine officer, because the way you carried yourself when you were in school, you were educated, you were smart, you were the guy, man, and you were the guy that everybody looked to. So I knew at some point, whatever you would end up doing in your life, you would do it successfully. And that's exactly what happened when you went to Western State. You developed a plan. You said, I'm going to become, a Marine pilot, if you will. I'm going to go through the officer candidate school. I'm going to get my bachelor's degree, and I'm going to go do all my training in Pensacola. Walk us through you landing in Pensacola, and now, you've already earned the title Marine, and now you're going through training to become an aviator.
Yeah, sure. And I'll go through a little bit more of, what I was thinking in college, so that, if somebody's thinking about joining the Marine Corps, they can, see how I did it, and maybe they can learn something from that. So as far as you mentioned in high school, and I appreciate you saying that, you pictured me as a Marine officer. That would have been awesome. Back then, to think that you would see me as a Marine officer, while we were in high school, it's that means a lot to me. And it's funny you mentioned Jeremy Rosson. He obviously is from our high school. He joined the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. And I remember watching Born the 4th of July. And Jeremy Rosson said he wanted to be an infantryman. And I was like, Jeremy, are you sure you want to do this, man? Like, holy cow. I just saw this movie. It's terrible. You're the first to go. He's like, no, I want to be a grunt. And I'm just like, all right, man. Well, if anybody's going to do it, you're going to do it. And I was proud that he was going to go serve. But I was concerned. I was concerned for him, and it was, definitely a non-wartime that he went in, but I was concerned for his well-being. And I remember that conversation. I remember talking with him about it. So leading up into college now, so you asked, if I had that master plan. I didn't really have a master plan. I wanted to play sports as long as I could. In fact, my major was undecided. I didn't have a major. And then I ended up majoring in business. After a few years, I was like, my parents have a business. I enjoy doing business type stuff. So I think I'll, put my effort towards that. So I ended up going with the business degree there at Western. And as far as, the military, I had always been interested in the military. And when I would go out hunting, I was like, I wonder if this is, kind of what it's like. Is this what it's like when they're out there walking around with the rifle? I enjoyed walking around with the rifle. I enjoyed hunting, and I think you can apply a lot of those skills to the military. So, at any rate, there is a long history of military service in my family. It skipped my dad and my mom, but both my grandpas served in World War II. My grandpa on my mom's side was on Iwo Jima. He was with 5th Marines. And
Wow.
my dad's side, he was an artilleryman with the Army, and he was in the Philippines. So I know that my parents always held them in a high regard, and pretty much everybody that knew them held them in a high regard. So that stuck in my brain as something very important, and that stayed with me. And I wanted to carry on the Marine tradition in my family. I saw it as one of the more difficult services to be in. And what really hooked me was the recruiter. Well, aside from like years and years ago with Top Gun, my dad was super interested in aviation. He took me to air shows all the time. And I saw Top Gun and I was just like, wow, like I would love to fly something cool like that. So that was also in my brain as well. But I saw the recruiter in college, and he had his dress blues on, looked really sharp. He had these shiny pamphlets with an F-18 on the front and all the other aircraft inside of it. And he was like, hey, he's like, you ever thought about flying for the Marine Corps? And I was just like, no, like, well, what do you guys even fly? Like, I figured it was all helicopters, and like, didn't even really know what the Marine Corps flew. That they had the F-18, they had the Harriers, they had the EA-6B Prowler, that they had C-130s, that they had these aircraft, and they had Cobras, and they had Hueys, and CH-53s, 46s. So I was just like, wow. He's like, yeah, he's like, if you pass this test, I can get you an aviation contract, and we can get you signed up for the Marine Corps. And I was like, really? I was like, geez, like where I didn't really have a plan other than to, get my business degree and, continue to play sports as long as I could. This was a plan. And, I talked it through with my brother, talked it through with my family, and they were like, yeah, this is not only this is a plan, this is a great plan. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's no way you're not going to do this. Like, you have to do this. So I studied really, really hard and took the aviation test, and I passed it the first time. And I was like, you know what? This is it. Like, I'm going to do this. So I had an aviation contract, and I signed up for the Platoon Leaders Class program. And this was a juniors and seniors type program where you do it during the summers. So like between my sophomore and junior year, and between my junior and senior year, I would do 2 6-week sessions. There was either that, or you could do a 10-week session, which was the OCC program. And it just so happened to work out better for me to do the 2 6-week programs. Um, but they did lose a lot of people that wouldn't come back to seniors. They would, say, you know what, that was hard enough that first 6 weeks, and I'm not coming back. And, it certainly weighs on you that entire year as you're going through school. Am I going to go back through this again, for another 6 weeks this next summer? Because it's
Mm-hmm.
similar to boot camp. It's a little bit like boot camp plus, with not only just following all the time, but you have to do a lot of leading. They put you out there in front of the squad. You got to lead guys through the jungle of
Mm-hmm.
Quantico. And so it was extremely difficult, mentally and physically. Um, in fact, the thought of, not continuing the program, it crossed my mind. Absolutely. As I was going through, I think it was through juniors, the first time that I went, I thought that I was going to get injured. And, what did I have right after officer candidate school? 2-a-days, 2-a-days for football. So, well, some of these guys are out there, doing whatever they do over the summer. I'm out there in the jungles of Quantico, sweating like crazy, going on long humps on these trails that have endless hills, and your knees start bothering you. And I had a question in my mind, and, I quickly got rid of that question because that kind of eats at you. And I was like, you know what? I'm doing this. I will be able to recover. I'm young. I can do this. I'm going to do this right now, and my body will recover. And it did recover. And I didn't sustain any, significant injuries from officer candidate school. I had a staph infection in my legs from going through the swamp and having my boots on so long during the crucible. But who doesn't get that? So I did the juniors and seniors PLC program, and then once you graduate from college, you become a second lieutenant. So
Mm-hmm.
it got me on the path that I have been on, and I feel fortunate that I got on that path. I'm glad I saw that recruiter that day. I can think of one other guy that was on my team, Pete Solano. He was senior to me, and he went through Western as well. And I think he did the OCC program, but I didn't even become aware that he did it until I saw him years later in the Marine Corps. So yeah, it was definitely a great program, and I would definitely do it again, and I really enjoyed it.
So I got a question for you. When you graduated from college, when you walked across that stage and were handed your degree, did somebody promote you later that day, or is that something that you have to fly back to Quantico to do?
No, so we just set it up with the recruiter. So they have officer selection officers, and there's a office in Denver. And Captain Corbett, he was my officer selection officer. Great Marine, great man. And we ended up doing it at a nice restaurant down in Colorado Springs. And he brought his gunny down, and that was my first salute, was from the gunny. And yeah, we had a little ceremony at the restaurant, and it was the first time I'm wearing dress blues, and no ribbons or anything on there, just my butter bars for a second lieutenant.
Yeah, I got a question that you probably don't get asked a lot. Probably get asked a lot of Marine Corps combat stuff, flying, all the neat stuff. What type of an officer were you, Aaron?
Well, I would think firm, fair, and consistent is a way that I would like to have officers that I've served with, and I strive to be like that. One of the captains I served with said that was what you should expect of your leaders, to be firm, fair, and consistent. So I would think that is how I modeled myself. Leadership by example, saying what you mean and meaning what you say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I said too, you displayed a lot of great leadership from a young age, that I picked up on all these years down the road. And I also picked up on it when I was 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, blocking for you when you're running the ball, or, when you're playing quarterback, or, you're playing running back, or if Rawson was in the backfield, or, whatever it may be, we were always working as a unit. And like I said, you always carried yourself as a leader, so I could see you being a Marine's Marine, not the, oh, that second lieutenant thinks he's better than me and blah, blah, blah. You know how a lot of Marines will say.
Right, right.
But I would have loved to have had the opportunity to serve with you in the Marine Corps, because I think you would have been a very special one to serve under. And I'm sure you've heard that countless of times in your 20-year career in the Marine Corps. Now, you're a dedicated husband and father, but you also served 20 years in the Marine Corps. Can you explain when you started your family, and what the experience is like when you're deployed overseas in a combat zone and you've got your loved ones back home in Carlsbad?
Well, as you mentioned with Marine leaders and officers, I was fortunate to have a lot of good officers that I served with, and guys that were senior to me and my peers as well. And as far as starting a family, I mean, the going in was like, hey, don't get married till you're a captain. Like, make sure that you got everything lined up. You've gotten some experience under your belt. Kind of hold off a little bit. So I stuck with that, and went through flight school, which was a tremendous challenge. That was another, Marine Corps and, Naval Aviation challenge. It was like learning a different language, the aviation, speak that we use. It was difficult. I hadn't really flown that much before until I got to flight school. So they throw you in this, fast little turboprop, and you're learning this new language of aviation, and it's kind of a fire hose effect. So that it was difficult. There's, the swim training was difficult. We grew up in Colorado. Like, there was one pool within like 5 miles of Woodland Park, I think. So it's not like you're swimming all the time, but it was a challenge. And I was also just sidetracked just a little bit, but it was really good to see somebody else from Woodland Park when I was down in Pensacola, Florida. Dylan Thorpe, who was a year younger than us. I
He's
ended
an
up being
absolute
his,
warrior.
yeah, I was his best man in his wedding, and he was my best man in my wedding. And, obviously when I was out of flight school, we weren't married, but sure enough, who shows up? Dylan Thorpe's down there, and he's in the Air Force. So it was very unusual, and it was just awesome to have another person that you knew, like a brother, that was down there going through a lot of the same training that you're going through, because we send people to Air Force training, Air Force sends people to our training. So he was one of the lucky ones that got to go down to Pensacola, Florida. So it was
That's great.
unbelievable to be able to hang out with him, while we were down there. So that was a blessing, and he's been a blessing, throughout my life. We've been in contact, throughout the years. He just had his retirement last spring, and it was by far the best retirement ceremony I've ever been to. And I was so proud to be there with his family and his daughter and everything. It was awesome. So got a little sidetracked there, but it's something I feel like I
No.
had to mention.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
yeah, so the going in was, hey, like, get your training done, get some experience, get to be a captain, then, start thinking about marriage after that. So,
Hmm.
I got through flight school, selected Cobra's West Coast, which is the number one choice that I wanted, and I selected it. That's what I got. So I was fortunate to get that, and that's out at Camp Pendleton. So, went through the training, learning how to be a Cobra pilot, which is another very unique challenge. Uh, they say that Cobra pilots eat their young, and it's because we have a very high expectation of how we need to pilot the aircraft to do close air support. Very important mission for the guys on the ground. And you got to hit a TOT and you got to hit the target. And the TOT is the time on target. But at any rate, we are very hard on our lieutenants. So as you're going through, you're a lieutenant. And, I was a first lieutenant at this point, and made it through Cobra training. And myself and two other lieutenants had graduated about the same time from learning how to fly the Cobra at Camp Pendleton. And what was going on right then? It was 2003. The Iraq War had just kicked off in the spring. So we finished our training at Camp Pendleton, and they were like, "Hey, you three right there, you're going to join your squadron over in Kuwait." And we were like, "What? You got to be kidding me!" So a lot of the other guys, they would just go to their squadron that was, not based overseas at this time, but there was a war going on. And while I was in flight school with Dylan, 9/11 happened, and we knew our service was going to be riddled with wars, and we knew it was going to be a difficult time when that happened. And it sure came true. But yeah, so me and two other lieutenants, they were like, "Hey, you guys are going to HMLA 369 over in Kuwait." And HMLA 369 is the world famous gunfighters. The call sign is gunfighters, and you couldn't pick a better name or a better squadron. The history of that squadron is distinct and very long. Very proud to have served in that unit, and I've been in a few other squadrons, a few other units, and it's really tough to beat the leadership that we have in that and the traditions with HMA 369. So they shipped us over to Kuwait. We flew over on a commercial flight in our civilian clothes, with a bunch of sea bags full of our gear. And we had some guys from the squadron pick us up at Kuwait International, and then they brought us over to the base Ali Al Salem, which is an Air Force base. And at that time, we were flying missions, from Kuwait up to Iraq, and we would go up to Iraq for about a week or two, and then we would swap out crew every couple of weeks. So we would fly, from Kuwait up the Euphrates River into Al Qut, and then we'd fly missions out of Al Qut for about a week or two, and then we would swap out and come back to Kuwait, rest and refit a little bit. So it was a very interesting time to go from just learning how to fly this, new helicopter that's got very advanced weapon systems to having to fly them in a combat situation and getting shot at, as a wide-eyed first lieutenant, just trying to figure out, what's going on in Iraq. And it was very interesting and eye-opening. Like every time we flew at night, we got shot at. And during the day, I think we were probably getting shot at. We just didn't see it. And luckily we didn't get hit, but certainly we saw it at night. It sticks out like a sore thumb. We'd wear night vision goggles as we're flying around. While we were looking under the goggles, you'd see these red softballs coming up. And, while you were looking on the goggles, you'd see, green softballs coming up. And it was a very eye-opening experience. Yeah, it was quite an introduction to the, Fleet Marine Corps.
Oh, I can imagine, man.
Yeah.
I can only imagine. And you mentioned Dylan Thorpe, an absolute legend. I mean, I just saw the pictures from his retirement, and he's got a special mark on his plane. I think it's the only plane, maybe, and with something about his combat flight time or something like that, with like I don't know, confirmed kills or something like that. But it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, the Air Force does it right. Yeah, they really do. They have where they keep their flight gear. I mean, it's immaculate. You would think it's the Thunderbirds or the Blue Angels or something, because they have like little placards with their names. Everything's all nice. Not very Marine Corps at all. Very Air Force. But yeah, it was very impressive. So so it was great. Going to his retirement. That was awesome. Back to the just 3 lieutenants headed over to Kuwait. We flew some missions in Iraq, and then that started our deployment cycle that we were on. We were with that unit. We were going to be with that unit for a few years, and then you either stay and do more time, or you do a B billet. But then we're kind of leading up, get promoted to captain. Then I had been dating Trudy, my wife, when I was going through the training squadrons when I met her. So I was dating her, through that deployment to Kuwait, and so how was it? I mean, it was difficult. It was hard to get on the phone to talk to her. It was hard to get on the phone to talk to your family. There's a line. If there was a phone available, there's a line. And if there was a line, it was a long line. And, you could barely get any time to call and check in on your family. And this was before, like Facebook and social media and that kind of thing. So as far as the ability to message people and, it wasn't there. So it was very difficult to communicate. And, a lot of times we'd send letters. So like letters would be how we communicate, kind of old school. Mm-hmm. So I'd been dating my wife, Trudy, and then we ended up getting married in 2005. And then you actually got to meet her, in 2005. We had our 10-year reunion. So we got that picture together when we had that reunion in Woodland Park. So you got to meet her, and I got to meet Jenny as well. So I got to meet your wife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah, so I kind of stuck to the plan that the officers before me were like, "Hey, wait till you're captain," and but once you're married, it's a totally different dynamic, and then the kids come along, but that increased the difficulty of the deployment significantly with marriage and especially children. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I know you got a lot of questions to ask me.
Yeah, so you would end up serving 20 years in the Marine Corps. And I mean, let's face it, you were a young Marine, a first lieutenant when all these wars kicked off. And this war would be 20 years. So literally your whole entire career was in wartime. So you have over 500 hours of logged combat flight time. Now, you were explaining close air support, right, for the mission of the Cobra.
Right.
Can you explain exactly what your job description and duties were as a pilot on the Alpha Hotel 1 Whiskey and Zulu, please?
Right. So close air support and escort missions, those are the primary missions that we do. In our squadron, we have Cobras and Hueys. And we had come to terms with, we were going to have to fly together. A lot of times in 2003, we were flying with all Cobras together. And we found out very quickly that without having a crew chief, in the Cobra, and the gun only be able to go 110 degrees either side, when 2 Cobras would fly by, the enemy would notice that. And although it's not very smart to shoot at Cobras, it was hard for us to determine the point of origin when they would shoot at us. So we ended up flying with mixed section, and a mixed section would be a Huey and a Cobra. So that door gunner is able to see where that fire is coming from. They're able to engage that target, where we have to basically turn around, kind of get oriented towards the target. Well, the gun on the Huey can go either side of the aircraft. They got one on each side, and then go nearly behind the aircraft, not quite because they don't want to shoot the tail. But we found, with those tactics that, is better to fly with a mixed section. That way the Hueys could kind of cover our six. But yeah, the missions, close air support, and escort missions. And so I'll go through escort real quickly. We do ground escort, and we also do, aerial escort. So ground escort, picture a convoy going up, a main supply route, and us on either side of that convoy, looking for anything that could attack that convoy, even to look for IEDs, using our forward-looking infrared, see if there's anything hotter on the road that shouldn't be there. So whether it's scanning the road, scanning the route, scanning for any threats along either side. So that's the escort mission for, ground escort. And then we escort the assault support aircraft, whether it be 46s at the time and 53s. And we can also do some Osprey escort, the MV-22. But so that's the escort mission. Then, close air support's the other mission. It's the primary mission, HMLA. And when you have troops that are in close vicinity of the target, they need support. They have potentially internal assets they can use, but they want some assets with precision guided munitions. And the Cobra is, that's one of the main things that brings to the fight. We had the Hellfire missile, which is a laser guided missile, and TOW missile, which is a wire guided missile. So we brought precision munitions to the fight. And when you're fighting in a highly publicized war where there's media everywhere, people take a lot of interest into what you're shooting at. So it's key to be as precise as possible. And that's a little bit why I mentioned Cobra pilots eat their young. They have a high expectation of their pilots because we're in close vicinity of the friendlies that are out there on the forward line of troops, and we've got civilians that could be in the area as well. So when we shoot, it has to be on target, and that's why we have such a high standard.
You have got to listen to the podcast that I did with Commander Houlihan, a naval JAG officer. He's a good friend of mine. He's a lawyer. Now, he's out of the Navy. He was a part of a kill chain. Have you ever heard of the kill chain?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, of course. Yeah, you're a pilot. So he would be the guy that would say, let's go. And you're coming in hot. So he would be the one that would look over everything, sign it off, because we have rules of engagement, unlike anybody else. So we've got to do it right. There's attorneys involved, and they're looking to make sure, okay, are there no civilians? Are there no this? They're looking at risk factors, and they're looking at this and that. And once these JAG officers come to the conclusion that you can go and you can fire and you can take out the target and you can take out the enemy, that could take 30 seconds, at times. And sometimes it could take hours. And you've got Marines on the ground over here that are at risk. And you're like, guys, I'm ready. I'm ready. Did you ever have any, say, times when you knew it was going to be a good shot, it was going to be good to go in there and to back up a lot of Marines, when you were told to stand down until we got that final approval from, like, say, those kill chains?
Yeah, we had delays. We would have to hold off to the side until we could get approval. But if it was urgent, the ground commander would override whatever bureaucracy was going on, and we would do what needed to be done. But yeah, you mentioned rules of engagement, and it's extremely difficult when you're using our rules of engagement and you're fighting a force that has no rules of engagement. It's just engage whoever. And to the point of us putting a red cross on our medevac helicopters, it's almost a target. Like, they aren't allowed to carry defensive weapons. They can have an M16 for self-defense if they had to land somewhere that they weren't supposed to. But it was just fascinating to me that we would have a black with a red. Looks like we drop off line there. Sorry about that.
It's okay. We're here.
Yeah. So anyways, it was kind of maddening to have a red cross on the side of a helicopter. It was almost a target where the enemy has nothing remotely close to that. And their rules of engagement are engage whenever they want to, and we're almost painting a target on the side of a Black Hawk because of our rules. So it was very different dynamic to combat.
Yeah, that bureaucracy is horrible, and it's cost so many lives, and doesn't need to be that way, but it is, unfortunately. It's the ugly truth. But I'm glad that you had some good ground commanders there that would override a lot of that stuff to save lives. Of many Marines and soldiers and alike that are put into difficult situations on the ground with no way out. And at least they would have somebody like you up there, almost like as in a Red Dawn moment, to say, "There's our guy right there. Yeah, take him out. Let's go." I mean, I can imagine the adrenaline that you have as a Cobra pilot. Describe the adrenaline.
We trained to such a high standard that it's just mission execution. I mean, the adrenaline comes when, you're getting shot at and you have to make evasive maneuvers. That was definitely, adrenaline inducing event, especially as a young lieutenant there in 2003. But yeah, when you're doing the mission, I mean, we had gone through so many rehearsals and repetitions and such difficult training. We would even train to, a completely different standard, a higher standard of, a non-third world country, more near peer type adversary. We would train to that standard. And then when we would go to the, third world kind of conflict, it had its own challenges, but we had trained to such a high standard that, I mean, there was a lot of adrenaline, after you got done, and it was hard to get some sleep after a mission. But when you were doing it, you're just in the moment and kind of executing.
It's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And like you said, too, you mentioned Dylan Thorpe. You guys were almost like the same type of kid in school. And it's funny that you guys took the same career path. One in the Air Force, one in the Marine Corps, but
And
with
to
both.
further make it even more similar, I mean, he was an attack pilot. Like, he flew the A-10. It's an attack jet. Its mission is for ground attack. And, the same thing with Cobra. So, it was awesome to see him choose that path.
Yeah, and it was amazing. Like that picture he took of his bird, and like, do you know what that was on the side of his airplane?
I know. I think there's a special thing with his call sign on there. I don't recall, precisely what they had for any strike missions that he had.
Yeah, because I think there's one of them, and it's him. I mean, like, he is a legend.
Well, he is absolute legend. I mean, he was the East Coast Air Show pilot, so they only picked the best of the best to fly in air shows, and he was one of those guys, and he is one of those guys. And I was very proud that he chose that path, and I was proud to be at his ceremony. It was a really good time.
Woodland Park has put out some good people. It really has.
Definitely.
Man, that's awesome. So describe what it was like when you were with First LAR in Iraq.
Yeah, so I did a couple deployments with 369, and they were to Iraq, and then you do that B billet. Some people go to recruiting, some people do different jobs. Well, mine was a factor. So I was a forward air controller with First LAR, and it's a light armored reconnaissance vehicle. And we have a whole different group of vehicles. One's a LAV-25. It has a 25 millimeter on it. We have logistic vehicles. We have the command and control vehicle, has all the antennas sticking out of it, and that's the one they put the forward air controller in. The one with all the antennas, looks like a big target. So it was amazing. I had mentioned this to you before, but when you're in a squadron and you haven't done a ground tour with an infantry battalion or a light armored reconnaissance battalion, you always wonder what it's like. What's it like on the other side of the fence? What's it like with the grunts? That's our main focus, is supporting the guys on the ground, the infantrymen. So that was a very unique experience. It was incredible training, incredible officers, incredible enlisted, incredible staff NCOs, incredible warrant officers. We had an Australian exchange officer. He was incredible. I mean, you wonder what it's like, and then you get to see it. And it was just like, wow, this is what the other part of the Marine Corps, the main focus, is like. And instead of being a support element, you are being supported. Like, you ask for it and you're probably going to get it. You need support from artillery, you're going to get it. You need more jets, you need more, Hueys and Cobras. So, what does a forward air controller do? close air support. We control it from the ground. So essentially, that there's a Marine officer that's with that forward line of troops or in a situation where they need close air support, they need fires close to their position, and the forward air controllers trained in doing call for fire with artillery and mortars, and also close air support, which would include any of the attack or fighter aircraft that we have in our inventory for the U.S. So we learn how to use their weaponry in close proximity to us. So yeah, it was a great experience. I will say I was really worried about I was going to have to deploy with First LAR, and we went to Rawa, Iraq, and I think everybody will remember IEDs, improvised explosive devices. Everybody was very concerned about it. You couldn't watch the news without seeing another soldier dies, another Marine dies, another airman dies, whatever, from an IED, and it was just constant, and they kept getting more advanced. It was remote controlled IEDs, pressure plate IEDs, you name it, and they have something better, something we can't detect. So I was extremely concerned about. I mean, I'm married at this point, and I didn't have any kids yet, but I was worried about my family not having me, and not being around for them, not being around for my parents, not being around for my brother, not being around for my wife. It was difficult. I was extremely concerned that we would get hit in an ID, and whether I make it or not, or if I'm missing a limb, that was something that was always weighing on me. And so luckily with First LAR and those vehicles, they can go anywhere. So we didn't go on hardly any roads. We were like combing the desert, going through like Mad Max. It was literally like a Mad Max movie, like cruising through the desert and going to small Bedouin camps. And sometimes the vehicles it's a small light armored reconnaissance vehicle, but some of the streets are so narrow in some of these cities that like the vehicles wouldn't even be able to go through. So we'd have to do dismounted patrols, and that was a little interesting as well. Kind of worried about getting sniped or stepping on an IED. So there was a concern there. It was a very stressful deployment, stressful for my family, stressful for me, but very rewarding. I mean, the infantry officers that I served with are, they're just incredible people, and I still stay in contact with some of them. And I was very impressed with how professional they were and how much they just knew about everything. I mean, the infantry officers are held to such a high standard, and they're trained in call for fire. They're trained in close air support. I would give them some training as well, but they just knew a lot about everything. And some people are, jacks of all trades and master of none, but the Marine infantry officer, I mean, they're something special. They are a master of a lot of trades.
Mm-hmm. So I'm sure when you spent some time with First LAR, all it did was make you a better pilot. Probably hands down. Now you've come full circle. You've seen how it all works on every single side, on every single dynamic. Now you go back up in the sky when you're done with LAR. What was that like going from flying and then going to LAR and then going back in the air?
Well, you read my mind. I mean, it was amazing. I was chomping at the bit. I wanted to get back and fly the Cobra again. I mean, it's an amazing platform. I love the community, love the aircraft, love the maintainers. Gosh, the guys that work their asses off getting that aircraft available so that we can go fly it. Just the hours and hours of work they put in. But I was chomping at the bit, and the squadron was happy to have me come back. I came back to AH-1W 369, right where I wanted to be, and got it more qualifications. And then, I mean, they asked me questions where it's like, hey, what's it like on the other side? Well, hey, this is what it's like. This is what the ground commander's looking for. This is what the forward air controller is looking for. Like, this is what they want to hear. This is what you need to say. This is what you do. And so it was good. It was a great experience coming back. You hit the nail right on the head. It was the exact experience I needed to bring experience to the squadron, to help them out, to help them do their mission more successfully. And it made us, it made me more knowledgeable and helped our squadron. And so it was a win-win situation. I really enjoyed doing that tour. And that deployment was 2009 that I'd come back. Now I'm flying again. So there's this constant theme of these like, what's the next deployment going to be? Like, it's this constant nagging of like, geez, I'm going to have to leave my family again. So at this point, I've got a son. Trudy and I had our first son, and I named him Dylan. My oldest son's name's Dylan, and at this point, I'm deployed, and I have a son and a wife at home, and I'm a senior captain, instructor pilot in squadron, and I'm paired up with a great set of combat crew, first lieutenants, just great Marines, like guys that are chomping at the bit like I was when I was growing up as a first lieutenant. And now they're looking to me. They want to know what I'm going to do. They want to know what was it like, with an infantry battalion. What was it like, with light armor reconnaissance unit. So I'm teaching them all the things that I've learned, and it was great serving. Two of the guys I'll mention, Chad Emsweiler and Pat Richardson, two of my combat crew from 2009. Just amazing Marines, amazing human beings. It was a pleasure to fly with them, and it was a pleasure to teach them the things that I had learned to that point. That deployment was fairly benign. It was 2009 in Iraq, and we're starting to kind of close things down and, starting to get away from Iraq. And, it seems like we were moving more towards Afghanistan, so there wasn't all that much going on. There was a lot of downtime during that deployment. I mean, we're constantly flying, but it just wasn't as active. There wasn't as much close air support, or, armed reconnaissance type missions or escort missions. So it was slow, but we needed to be there. If the ground commander needed us, like, we needed to be there. So we were there. I was once again in a unit that supports. So I was there in Iraq for that last deployment to Iraq that I had. And I knew, I had a son now, I had a wife, and I was worried that I wasn't going to be around for him, whether it was, a lot going on in the Iraq war or not. You're flying a helicopter, and it's a dangerous line of business. So there's that constant concern. Is my family going to, not have me in their lives? Am I going to see them again? Am I going to be, injured, incapacitated, or something like that? So there's a constant nagging. I knew I needed to do something. I needed to change. So I saw that there was a position available at the training squadron that doesn't deploy, and we just train those fresh lieutenants from flight school from Pensacola. We'll train them up. So I ended up doing a tour at the training squadron, and that was kind of closing out my Iraq deployments. So that was it there.
You're a national treasure, man. I mean, you really are. You served, your country honorably, courageously. What you did, it is not an easy job, and you did it well. And your service, your sacrifice, everything that you have been through, and all your combat time, and all your teaching skills that you have been teaching to these next generation of warfighters, is truly honorable. And just everything you did, like I said, just being away from your family and having that anxiety. And I know a lot of people always, especially being an enlisted guy, we think officers don't have any problems. Man, officers are like bigger than, just getting out of Marine Corps boot camp, you look at a Lance Corporal and you're like, holy shit, dude, that's a freaking Lance Corporal. Or a corporal's God. Looking at a captain or a major, come on, company commanders. It's almost as if you guys are immortal and you guys don't have feelings, but I know you do. And it was neat of you to just describe that feeling when you were overseas, and you did not want to become a statistic over there. And you did have a family, and you had a child and a wife that you wanted to come home to, and you didn't want to be injured. So you still served your country, but now you were training these pilots, these future pilots, and giving them all of the expertise and knowledge that you have acquired for so long over there, boots on the ground and in the sky. So you're an honorable man. And like I said, I'm very proud to know you. But we got to cut this interview now because we are at the 1 hour. So I just, wanted to sincerely thank you for coming on the show today, man. It really means a lot.
Well, I wanted to thank you as well, man. Thank you for all you did with the tally bill. You are helping veterans all the time with this podcast as well. I really enjoyed listening to it, and thank you for your service, and thank you for everything you've done with the Tally Bill and all the veterans you've
Amen.
helped.
Hoorah.
Hoorah. Semper Fi.
Hoorah.